So we're going to look at improper fractions and writing those as mixed numbers, and then writing mixed numbers as improper fractions. To begin with, I want to start to build up a picture by writing whole numbers as fractions. If we take, for example, 1, well, if we were to write this as a fraction, we could write it as 1 over 1. If we wanted to write it in terms of halves, we could write this as 2 over 2, or 3 over 3, or 4 over 4, 5 over 5, and so on. But what about if we had 2? How could we write this in terms of halves, thirds, quarters, or fifths, for example? Well, 2 would be made up of 4 halves. In terms of thirds, well, this would be 6 thirds. If this was done in terms of quarters, well, this would be 8 quarters. And in terms of fifths, this would be 10 fifths. An improper fraction is where the numerator is greater than the denominator. In each of these cases, when we're looking at the improper fraction, the numerator of the improper fraction is the same as multiplying the whole number by the denominator of the improper fraction. So if we look at 2 is equal to 4 over 2, if we multiply the whole number 2 by the denominator of 2, 2 times 2 is equal to 4, and this is equal to the numerator, so 2 is equal to 4 over 2. If we were looking at the improper fraction of 6 over 3, well, 2 multiplied by the denominator 3 is equal to 6, and this is equal to our numerator. And for 8 over 4, 2 multiplied by 4 is equal to 8, and 2 multiplied by 5 is equal to 10. We're going to come back to this later. So that's writing a whole number as an improper fraction. Well, what about writing an improper fraction as a whole number? If we have 6 over 2, or 6 halves, what is this as a whole number? Well, you should be familiar with the idea of dividing the numerator by the denominator to find the decimal equivalent. Well, 6 divided by 2 is equal to 3. So 6 over 2 is actually equal to 3. If we have 12 thirds, well, this is going to equal 4 because 12 divided by 3 is equal to 4. And if we had 21 over 7, well, the answer again is going to be 3 because 21 divided by 7 is equal to 3. So we've written improper fractions as whole numbers where the numerator is exactly divisible by the denominator. But what happens if we have, for example, 3 over 2, or 3 halves? How can we write this? The problem is that 3 is not exactly divisible by 2. If we look at this as a drawing, we can show 3 halves like this. 2 of the halves make a whole one, and we have another half. So this whole one represents the 1 as it were, and this half represents a half. So 3 over 2 is equal to 1.5. And this is what we call a mixed number. It's made up of whole numbers and fractions. If we had, for example, 8 over 3, well, again, 3 doesn't go exactly into 8. If we look at this as a drawing, we can show 8 thirds like this. Here are our 8 thirds, and we've created 2 whole ones, and we have 2 thirds left over. So we can write 8 thirds as 2 and 2 thirds. But let's try and do this without doing any drawings. Going back to 3 over 2 again, the numerator of 3 isn't exactly divisible by 2. 3 divided by 2 is equal to 1, with a remainder of 1. Now we know that the mixed number is 1.5. Well, this 1 here is the whole one, and this remainder of 1 represents how many halves are left over, which in this case is 1. If we look at 8 over 3, Again, 8 is not exactly divisible by 3. So 8 divided by 3 is equal to 2 with a remainder of 2. Now we know the answer is 2 2/3. Well, this 2 here represents the 2 whole ones, and this 2 here represents the remainder. Let's have a look at this one. 9/2 or 9/2. Well, 9 divided by 2 is equal to 4 with a remainder of 1. So we have 4 whole ones and a half left over. I'm going to do 2 more examples. If you want to pause the video at any time to have a go at the questions yourself before I go through the answer, then do so. 15/4. Well, 15 divided by 4 is 3, because 3 4s are 12, with a remainder of 3. So 15/4 is 3 whole ones and 3/4. So 15/4 is 3 3/4. And here's the final one I'm going to do. 22/5. Pause the video if you want to have a go yourself. 22 divided by 5 is 4, because 5 4s are 20, with 2 left over. 4 remainder 2. So 22/5 is 4 whole ones and 2/5. Now let's look at writing mixed numbers as improper fractions. Again, let's go back to what we already know. We did 1.5, and we know that the answer is going to be 3/2. But let's look at how we can get from 1.5 to 3/2. When converting a mixed number to an improper fraction, the first thing I'm looking at is the denominator of the fraction. We have 1.5. The denominator is 2. I therefore know that I am dealing in halves. 1 we know is going to be 2 halves, 2/2, and we've got 1/2. So 2 halves add 1 half, which we can write like this, is equal to 3 halves, 3/2. This also introduces us to adding fractions, something I'm going to be looking at in another video. If we had 1 1/3, well, the first thing I'm doing is looking at the denominator of the fraction, which is 3. We are dealing here with thirds. So 1 we can write as 3/3, and we have 1/3. 3/3 add 1/3 is equal to 4/3. But I want to look at an alternative approach by drawing on what we've done here. If you remember earlier on, we looked at writing whole numbers as fractions. And in this particular example, we could see that by multiplying the whole number by the denominator, we could work out what the numerator was. And this is very much what we're going to do now. If we multiply this 1 here by the denominator, we get 2. 1 multiplied by 2 is equal to 2. And this is producing the numerator for this fraction here. And then we're going to add 1 half. And we end up with 2 add 1/2, which is what we've got over here. And of course the answer is 3/2. Similarly, with 1 1/3, if we multiply the 1 by the denominator of 3, 1 multiplied by 3 is equal to 3. And this is the numerator here. And then we have this 1/3 here. So we end up with 3 add 1/3. And this is what we've got over here. And we end up with the answer 4/3. I'm going to look at 4 more examples. In each case, you might want to pause the video if you want to have a go at these questions yourself. 1 3/4. We are going to end up with an improper fraction of something over 4. So we need to work out the numerator. Well, the numerator is going to be 1 multiplied by 4, which I get from multiplying the whole number by the denominator. And then, of course, we add the 3 for the 3/4. And, of course, this becomes 4 add 3 over 4, which is equal to 7 over 4. If we have 2 2/3, the first thing I'm looking at is the denominator of the fraction, which is 3. So that's going to be the denominator of the improper fraction. I now need to work out the numerator. Well, I do 2 multiplied by 3, add the 2/3. Well, that becomes 6 add 2 over 3, which is equal to 8 over 3. What about 3 3/4? So I'm looking at the denominator of the fraction, which is 4. So that's going to be the denominator of our improper fraction. Now to work out the numerator. Well, 3 multiplied by 4 is equal to 12. Add the 3 from the 3/4, and we end up with 15 over 4. And the last example, 2 3/5. So I'm looking at the denominator, which is 5. We have 2 multiplied by 5, which is equal to 10. Add the numerator of 3 from the 3/5. 10 add 3 is equal to 13. So 2 3/5 is equal to 13/5. So there's a brief introduction into writing improper fractions as mixed numbers and writing mixed numbers as improper fractions. That's all I'm going to be covering in this video. I hope you found it helpful, and thank you for watching.